This podcast is for you. You will be inspired. You have the ability to change your future. You have the ability to change your circumstances. I wish I had a resource like this 3 years ago.
Challenge yourself constantly.
You have to be a little bit patient.
I felt like I was in a hole looking up.
The whole idea is you have to become content in singleness.
I'd be lying if I said I haven't fired off some Instagram DMs.
The word dating is not mentioned in the Bible.
I dedicated my life at Tomorrow World to Jesus.
Welcome to the Single Man Podcast, where we delve into candid conversations with Christian men about their journey to faith, advice for their younger selves, and navigating dating. With a heart to reach men from all walks of life, dive into real stories of redemption, growth, and the hope found in following Jesus. I'm your host, Carlton French, a 29-year-old single Christian, and I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode. Let's jump into it. Hey, it's Carlton French. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Single Man Podcast and to this inaugural episode, where I'm going to be talking about my heart and my vision for the podcast and what you can expect from the podcast going forward, what the podcast is even about, why I came up with the name The Single Man Podcast, who I even am as Carlton French, and why you might want to listen going forward. I am, like I said, Carlton French, a 29-year-old Christian man who's committed to following Jesus, that is single, meaning I'm not dating, I'm not in a relationship, I'm not engaged or married. I am just single here in Atlanta, Georgia, and doing my best to follow Jesus every day and steward my years of life on this earth well. I wasn't always a Christian. I wasn't always someone that believed in Jesus or was following Jesus. I actually didn't come to belief in actually following Jesus until 3 years ago. In July of 2021, I committed my life to Jesus and fully surrendered to his lordship in my life. And before that, I had just been living life as a single man and, was caught up in the dating world, caught up in chasing money and fame and Instagram followers and social media clout. And it's something that I feel like I am uniquely positioned now as someone who is 29 and further along into my 20s to speak into single men's lives who are where I was at 3+ years ago, are just confused and aren't sure what they're supposed to be doing in life, are chasing the next date, chasing the next paycheck, chasing the next bonus, chasing the next Instagram follower, and don't really have much purpose or understanding of what they're supposed to be doing in life. And it's something that I wish I had a resource like this 3 years ago when I was caught up in the world and wasn't sure what the purpose of my life was. Was there a God? Was there a religion I should be following? Did somebody make the whole earth? Like, that seems crazy. Were there examples of men I could look up to and seek wisdom and advice from that had a belief in faith? I couldn't really find anything 3 years ago when I started to seek, okay, what was the purpose of life? And I started to seek that out as I was really at the lowest place I'd ever been in my life 3 years ago, with all these things in my life going wrong. I had thought I had a great career. I had started dating a girl who was my first girlfriend, was kind of all falling apart all at the same time. And I didn't understand what was going on. I thought I had been doing the right things, and I thought I had been, living in an honorable way. And I just was super empty and super broken when all these things of the world just came crumbling down. And I didn't really know what to do or where to turn. And I was so consumed with dating and wanting to find my wife and find someone to spend the rest of my life with. And I started to seek out single men to give me advice on how they were navigating dating, advice on how to become better at dating and being single and being in a relationship. And I really only found things that were, to be honest, very toxic looking back on, how to get more dates, how to use dating apps better. And it's something that I am frankly disappointed in how I previously dated and previously lived before committing my life to Jesus 3 years ago. And it's something that I'm hopeful this podcast can do, is help single men who don't know how to navigate dating, don't know how to navigate religion and faith, and can hear from men who are single themselves and are following Jesus and can understand that there is a purpose for your life. Your life doesn't start when you get in a relationship. Your life doesn't start when you get married. Your life doesn't start when you get the great job, or you get the bonus, or you get the house, or you get the dog and the white picket fence. Your life is starting now and has been going on for however long you've been alive. And every day you have the ability to change your future. You have the ability to change your circumstances, and you have the ability to become a better version of yourself today. And so that's my heart for this podcast. That's my vision for the podcast, is to inspire single men who are not Christian, are not religious, are not spiritual, to explore following Jesus as a single man. And I believe that if you explore following Jesus, if you explore what life with Jesus in your life will do for you, then your life will be forever changed for the better. And I am a living testimony of how 3 years ago I was completely broken and had no direction in life, no purpose in my life, had no real friends to speak of, no community, didn't know what I was doing when my relationship ended, when my job didn't give me the promotion I was hoping for. I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what the purpose of my life was, and was super broken. And I am hopeful that by hearing from me, Carlton French, as a Christian man who is single, and then also from friends and mentors of mine who I'm going to be bringing onto the podcast on a weekly basis and having conversations with, you will be encouraged as a single man yourself. You will be inspired to explore what life with Jesus will look like, and you will be encouraged in your time of being a single person, a single man, to not necessarily be out there chasing women, chasing dates, chasing your future wife, and thinking that your life starts when you have a relationship. There are so many amazing Christian men that I know that are single that are living life to the fullest, and they don't have to have a relationship. They don't have to be dating to start their life, to start their purpose. And I feel like it's something that is really underrepresented, and it's something that, to be honest, is hard to find. Like, there's no resources that I'm aware of that exist right now. There were no resources 3 years ago when I started to look for something like this, to have conversations with single men, specifically single men who are Christian, and talk about how they're navigating life, how they're navigating dating, and advice that they would have for their younger self. And so that's what the vision for the Single Man podcast is. I hope that if you are a single man who is listening, regardless of your faith background, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of where you grew up, this podcast is for you. And this podcast is solely to inspire you to live your best life as a single man. And I believe your best life as a single man is a life with Jesus Christ in it. And so I'm hopeful that through hearing my own testimony and my own story, which I will be posting next week on Friday, so make sure you look out for that, and keep an eye out for that episode next Friday. And then subsequent weeks, on a weekly basis on Fridays, I will be sitting down with friends and mentors of mine who are single themselves. I'll have some guests on who are dating and even engaged and married, but primarily single people, just so you can get a glimpse into the lives of Christian men from different relationship backgrounds and hear how they have come to faith in Jesus, how their life has been different, if it's been better or worse since becoming a Christian, and how they would speak to their younger self if they were able to. What advice would they give themselves if they could talk to themselves a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? What would they do differently? And last but not least, we'll talk about how they've navigated dating and relationships, how they're pursuing women as a single Christian man, how they pursued their wife if they're married, and how they're navigating being in a relationship if they're currently in a relationship. And I think it's going to be really inspiring and insightful conversation. And I pray and I hope that if you are listening to this episode now, you'll come back for the next episode. I'm also releasing the first episode today with my first guest, my friend Luke Reed, who's a great friend of mine who has helped me get to this point of the podcast with vision for the filming and editing. And I'm someone that has no background with filming or editing or producing content, and this is all new to me and is something that I don't necessarily feel equipped to do or good at, but I feel like God has put it on my heart and given me the means and people in my life to help me do it. And so I'm excited to get things started. So the name, The Single Man Podcast, I want to quickly touch on where that came from. I was very conflicted about what name to use for the podcast, and okay, God, what's a name that can kind of help draw people in and make people understand what the point of the podcast is and who it's for. And so there's almost a double meaning to the name, The Single Man Podcast. One, obviously talking about the relationship status of men. And so the target audience of this is for specifically single men to listen and be encouraged and be inspired. And then two, it also is alluding to the most famous single man who ever has lived on earth, and that being Jesus Christ, who Jesus completely changed the world as a single man who was not recorded to have dated, was not recorded to have been in a relationship, was not recorded to have married, and he lived 2,000 years ago and completely has changed the world since living 2,000 years ago. And so it's something that I believe if Jesus could change the world, obviously Jesus was God. And so I'm not saying that by someone listening to this podcast, they're going to be able to completely change the world. But if Jesus could change the world as a single man, then who's to say that single men out there can't change parts of the world? They can't change their friend group. They can't change their family. They can't change their relationship that they're in, and be inspired by other men who are further along in their journey than you are, to be encouraged and given advice to make the best of their single years on earth. And so that's my hope. That's my heart and vision for the podcast. I am excited. I am nervous. I've been feeling like a weight almost to this, because I believe it's something that God really wants to leverage to impact single men out there. And I want to be a good steward of the gifts and abilities that God has given me, be a good steward of my story, be a good steward of the time of you as a listener, be a good steward of the guests and friends who are going to be coming on the podcast and sharing their stories, sharing things that are vulnerable, things that are not talked about in media, are not talked about on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, and they're going to be vulnerable with the hope that God is going to use their stories, and God is going to use this platform to change the lives of single men. And I really believe that. And so I am excited to get things going, and I really appreciate you listening and your support. If there's any feedback, anything I can do for you as you're listening to the podcast, I would encourage you to please reach out to me through Instagram or through social media. I'm planning to post things on all the social media platforms, and my heart behind that is not to get more followers and to get more views and to get more numbers and get famous or something like that. My heart strictly behind the podcast is to impact the lives of single men and encourage them to explore a life with Jesus, and that they can leverage their years of being single for something bigger than themselves. And so that's my heart, and that's why I'm excited to get things started and to push things out onto social media, to not get more views, not to get more numbers, but to get more real single men who are exposed to the real stories of men who are going to be coming on the podcast. And so I really appreciate you listening to this inaugural episode. I am excited for you to listen to the next episode, which is also out today with my good friend Luke Reed. And then next week on Friday, I will be releasing my own personal testimony and story on how I came to belief and faith in Jesus. And then every subsequent Friday, I feel like God's given me the vision to release a new episode. And so my plan is to release 52 episodes over the next year, one a week every Friday for an entire year. And it is a tremendous amount of work. I have put in over probably 100 hours to the podcast to even this point to get to where we're at now, where you're listening to this episode, whether it be on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube. And it's been a lot of work, and it's been something that I believe that God has given me this year to do this, from the year that I'm 29 to 30, and put out a new episode every week and to inspire single men through my story and the story of other single men out there. And so I really appreciate you listening in this week, and I'm excited for the journey ahead. Please be praying for things as they continue, and I'm excited to continue this journey with you. Thank you so much for listening to this inaugural episode of the Single Man Podcast. Again, this is Carlton French, and go ahead and listen to the next episode, which is out now with my great friend Luke Reed. I'll talk to you again soon. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Single Man Podcast. If someone you know would benefit from this week's episode, I'd love for you to text them the link and invite them to listen. You never know how a simple invitation could change someone's life. We'll be back next Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, with a new episode. Until then, check out the video version of the podcast on YouTube, and you can engage with us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.